Hello, students. Welcome to lecture 2 for Unit 1. In last lecture, we already studied about the cell organelles and their functions. In this lecture, we are going to study about cell transportation and different ways for the molecules which can be helped to move across the cell membrane. So these are the learning objectives. Now, as you can see the picture where you can see different types of cell transportations. We will see them one by one. That is passive diffusion, facilitated diffusion, selective facilitated diffusion, primary active transport, secondary active transport, and endocytosis and exocytosis, so on. So the cell membrane is of a great multitask for the biology. They are very semi-permeable. It means they are not permeable to all the materials. As you can see the picture of a cell membrane here, they have control over the what molecules which can pass through this cell membrane. And some molecules can simply pass through this cell membrane, but some molecules need some kind of carrier materials to carry them from one side to another side of the cell membrane. So there are different types of the cell transportations. So that is active transport and passive transport. Passive transport, as you can see here, uh, they require some kind, they don't require any kind of energy, whereas that of a passive active transport requires some amount of energy to transfer the molecules from one side to another side. Let's look at these type of a transport system one by one. So move towards the passive transport. It does not require any kind of energy to move the substance from one side to another side of the cell membrane. There are different kind of the passive transport, that is a simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Let's just look at them one by one. Let's just move towards the simple diffusion. For a simple diffusion, it is movement of a solute from area of a higher concentration to the lower concentration. That is, you can see the gaseous exchange. Right, you can see if there is a higher concentration at one side of the cell membrane, and if it is inside of the cell membrane, the concentration of the gas is lower, and then they will get simply inside of the cell membrane through the simple diffusion, and it occurs due to the respiration with the human body, right? Upon inhalation, you can also see oxygen is brought towards the lung, and it quickly diffuses through the cell membrane of the alveoli and enters your circulatory system. That is the best example of your simple diffusion. As you can see here, the picture, you can see there is an exchange of the gases which happens due to the simple diffusion. Next one is a facilitated diffusion. It is also called as a carrier-mediated osmosis, and simply, the name itself indicates it requires a facilitated diffusion. It means it has some amount of a carrier required for facilitating transport of your proteins or any materials which will be transported through your cell membrane. For example, glucose transporter. So it is required when the glucose is absorbed in the cells into the human body. So glucose is a large molecule. It will not be simply transported through your cell membrane via cell diffusion. So it will require a specific channel to transport that glucose, right? Here is the diagrammatic representation of the glucose transportation. As you can see, this is a cell membrane, and these are the carrier proteins. These carrier proteins requires for the transportation of the glucose molecules. As you can see, extracellular space has a lot of glucose molecules, and they will be entrapped in these carrier proteins. And these carrier proteins will then release your glucose molecules in the intracellular space. And this is how your facilitated diffusion helps to transport a larger molecules through cell membrane, right? Next one is osmosis. Osmosis, it occurs usually when the substance in order to balance the concentration from the both extracellular and intracellular space. It is a continuous process. And there are two types of the osmosis solution, that is isotonic solution, hypotonic solution, and hypertonic solution. Isotonic means extracellular concentration is balanced with that of intracellular concentration. Hypotonic means there is a high concentration of Hypotonic means the concentration of the solute is inside the cell is higher compared to your extracellular. And hypertonic means the solute concentration outside is higher compared to your cell inside of the cell. As you can see, these are the three diagrammatic representations of your isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic solutions. So next one is the active transport. As we have already seen the passive transport, now move towards the active transport. Solutes from the regions of the low concentrations to the high concentrations membrane is crossed using energy. So this is the most important difference between the active and the passive transport. So active transport requires energy to transfer the materials from one side of the cell membrane to the other side of the cell membrane. So there are two different types of the active transport. That is a primary active transport and secondary active transport. So primary is also called as a direct active transport, and it utilizes some metabolic energy. Secondary active transport is also called as a coupled transport, or that is a co-transport. It means it will not directly get co-transported, and there is no direct coupling of the ATP. It will directly attach to the transport of the other molecules, and it will get transported. That's why it is called as a secondary active transport. So these are the different type of the diagrammatic representations for the primary active transport and the secondary active transport. In case of a primary active transport, as you can see, potassium is transported directly using a primary active transport mechanism, while secondary active transport uses glucose for transferring your molecule from one side of the cell membrane to the other side of the cell membrane. So there are again two different kind of processes for transporting your large materials, that is the endocytosis and exocytosis. So endocytosis, as you have already aware that endocytosis is a process where the large molecules and large particles, they get inserted into the cell, and it can be accomplished by forming a cell membrane bound sacs. It means small sacs will be found, it will entrap those large molecules, and those large molecules will get entered into the cell membrane. For example, it can be used to bring the large particles like glucose into the cell. Exocytosis, it means the real materials from inside cells can go out of the cell via exocytosis. Small vesicles are formed in the Golgi apparatus, and the materials which will need to be transported, it get filled inside your vesicles, and it can be transported. These are the diagrammatic representation of your exocytosis and endocytosis. So here, as you can see, the materials which need to be transported get engulfed here, and then once they are vesicles are formed, and they will be entered inside the cell. Similar way, endocytosis, the materials which need to be exocytosically transported outside the cell membrane will get entrapped in the Golgi apparatus like vesicles, and then these vesicles will get bursted out and will release the materials outside of the cell. So this is a major difference between your exocytosis and endocytosis. So students, we have learned today active transport and passive transport. Right. I hope you have understood these topics. So let's move towards very important section, that is your question and answer. Let us hope you understand this topic and you're able to answer the questions right away. So as you can see the question here, which structure regulates the movement of a substance in and out of the cell? So nucleus, mitochondria, cell membrane, and ribosomes. So yes, correct. That is a cell membrane is a structure obviously to regulates the movement of a substances in and out of the cell. And there are, as we have already learned, there are different types of the cell transportation mechanisms which will happen on the cell membrane itself. So next question is, movement of a molecules from high concentration to lower concentration is called as a diffusion. We have already learned this definition in simple diffusion. So I hope you have understood this topic. Thank you for listening very patiently. See you in the next lecture. Thank you all.